Sandra Day O'Connor was the deciding vote in the case of Bush v. Gore. Now, if you guys can remember that, that was when the Supreme Court made the ruling that the recount in Florida was unconstitutional. Now, people were very upset about that. And here's what Sandra Day O'Connor had to say about it in 2012.
There's been some suggestion, again by poll takers, that that trend down for the judicial branch began with the Bush-Gore decision. That was one that was widely talked about at the time, as you know, and involved the public in a presidential election. And that could be something that triggered public re-examination.
Do you think that people thought it was too political, or the court had become too political? Is that?
I'm not sure, but I suppose that's part of it, yes. And of course, anytime you're deciding a case involving a presidential election, it's awfully close to politics.
All right, as I mentioned, that was in 2012, but recently she was quoted in the Chicago Tribune editorial board basically saying that the decision probably added to the problem by taking up the case over the disputed Florida recount, and that the justice's role in deciding the election gave the court a less than perfect reputation. Now, Desi, tell me what you think about it. I mean, I think it was probably one of the most controversial Supreme Court decisions, aside from things like Citizens United, of course, that the Supreme Court ever made.
Oh, easily, easily changed the course of world history, you know, when you think about it. And I find that I'm glad that she is coming out and saying this now. You know, better late than never, and honesty is always appreciated, I suppose. But you can see what an unusual decision it was, and I believe that she knew what she was doing at the time. As to why she decided to set aside her jurisprudence and go ahead and decide that this was an appropriate case for them to take, and to decide on stopping the recount. You know, these are mind-blowing decisions that the Supreme Court doesn't even cite now. They've actually, you know, made it explicit in that decision, you know, this is not going to be applying to anything else. So they knew what they were doing at the time. And you can tell that Scalia hasn't come out at all and said that. In fact, when he's asked about it, he tells people to get over it.
He does, right. So my question is, does this make Sandra Day O'Connor any better than Scalia? Because now that she is retired and now that she has absolutely no influence at all, like, she's saying, maybe it wasn't the best decision.
No, I think she's having a little buyer's remorse as to how history will look at the decision and look at how she made her decision in this. This is beyond the most cynical, ridiculous thing ever. I mean, this is beyond. I mean, this is really struggling with the words, because it's just, it's just crazy. They made a decision that they, as Desi is saying, that they said this will never apply to anything else ever again. And she, you know, the reason that Supreme Court justices are in for life is so that they shouldn't be influenced by the public and be up for elections and all that. So if we can't trust that they are going to do what they think is truly right and not be influenced by politics and the public, then really our whole system of government has no hope. So I don't think this is helping her in the long term.
I don't even really understand how they came to that conclusion, especially considering the fact that, you know, everyone knew that Florida had some issues when it came to the votes, right? Why can't we recount the votes? I don't understand why it was a problem. And then we end up electing well, I don't know if electing is the right word here, right? But the president ends up being Bush, who was a complete and utter disaster. There's no question about it. I mean, have you guys heard about the Bush Library? You know what I mean? It's incredible. Hugo, what do you think?
Well, I think that it was really good that Sandra Day O'Connor brought this up,
right,
because we can use it in future Supreme Court confirmations.
Will we, though?
Well, I think certain people need to use it. As I think certainly if we have good, strong progressives on the Senate Judiciary Committee, they can bring this up and say, look, even Sandra Day O'Connor has walked this back. We want to make sure that you are not going to, you know, obviously people obfuscate all the time in these hearings, but we want to make sure that you understand that there is now a historical consensus, or a building historical consensus, that this was one of the worst decisions, one of the most disastrous decisions in the entire history of the Supreme Court. And we want it on the record that we're repudiating it, and we expect you not to be a part of it.
What does it say when we have, Supreme Court justices that are very defiant about this disastrous decision?
Oh, I think it says that they know. They know what they were doing. They know. I think Scalia is absolutely clear about all of the aspects that he takes advantage of in his position. He's got a lot of issues. But, when she came out with this, when O'Connor came out with this, I think you could hear heads collectively explode all across the country as folks realize, this is something that it would have been nice if she would have thought of this before. But since then, when you look at her as a linchpin in history, being the deciding vote, how many things have come since then, and the decline of the reputation of the Supreme Court as more conservatives have been put onto the court after her. I mean, Alito has undone her legacy on so many major cases.
Yeah,
it's really sort of depressing that we have to have this come out now.
Yeah, and this does show how the judicial branch is not better than, or above, I should say, than the other branches of government, because everyone that works for the White House, a year after they resign or retire, they always write a book saying that basically everything that they did and every decision they made was BS. We didn't do that way and we did this. We need to expect and hope that the judicial branch will be above all that, but she's really this is her telling us that that's really not the case. So I guess maybe it's nice to hear it so we have a little insider view of what's going on, but it just shouldn't be how government operates.